Come with me, my friends, as we journey north to the Isle of Farheim, a land near and dear to many of our hearts, a land filled with wonder, merriment and bitter rivalries, a land that is home to the Drunken Dragon. It was a cool Friday evening in early autumn, and many wizards, warriors and friends had gathered in the Drunken Dragon to warm themselves by the hearth, with a belly full of the sweetest ale and a meal fit for a king. Vimtyr, the Whispering Axe, sat at the table by the bar, gulping down on his second mead of the evening. A quiet fellow was Vimtyr, but he always enjoyed a tasty mead at the tavern. "Ah, that hits the spot," he said, slamming down his tankard onto the wooden table. "Barkeep, a third if you'd be so kind." The bartender sent his beautiful tavern maiden over with the mead brewed from the finest of honey in all of Farheim. It was very famous, and it was Vimtyr's favourite. His eyes widened as the mead was placed before him. It was a good day indeed. Suddenly, the door of the Drunken Dragon flung open, and in walked a hunched figure. He was dressed in the finest of garments, but his face was as hairy as a monkey, for that is what he was. The figure strode towards the bar, clunking his quarterstaff on the floor with each step. Baboon, as he was known, was once a man, but cursed to take the form of a large monkey by a cunning witch. Baboon believed that the only way that he was able to break this curse was to become the richest man in the land. Only then would he be human once again. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," called out the baboon with a smug smirk. He glanced at Vimtyr, arm outstretched and ready to grab his tankard. "I was hoping it was going to be a peaceful evening, Baboon," said the Whispering Axe. "I assure you it will be," chuckled the monkey man as he reached the bar, ready to order a drink. The rest of the patrons of the Drunken Dragon were all on edge. When Vimtyr and Baboon were in the same room for longer than an hour, trouble usually brewed up. It's not known why they started this rivalry between the two former friends, or acquaintances as I should say, for many tell different versions of the same story. And I mean, I've got my own version, but I'm not even sure if that's the truth anymore. The evening continued peacefully for some time. Vimtyr quietly chugged on his mead, making little conversations here and there, and Baboon sat in the corner playing games of chance with his other fellow patrons, usually coming out top with the wagers. "Vimtyr, you seem quieter than usual today," said Baboon, jaunting across the bar on all fours. "I've got no time for your games today. You've made it clear many times that we aren't friends, so please let us remain strangers." "Well, I'm actually here to extend an olive branch," said Baboon slyly. "Would you care for a drink?" Vimtyr raised an eyebrow suspiciously. If you're offering. It would be rude of me to turn it down. Thanks, Baboon." "It's no trouble," said Baboon as he sauntered off towards the bar. The Whispering Axe sat quietly, unsure of the monkey's motives. Why was he being so friendly? Vledek wouldn't return until tomorrow, so it could be that Baboon thought that he had a free rein to cause mischief. Perhaps he did truly want to make peace. A tavern maiden approached Vimtyr a short time later with a tankard in her hands. Baboon raised his own drink from across the bar, and Vimtyr raised his tankard back. The bandit took one sip of his drink and spat it out immediately. "Wine!" yelled Vimtyr. He had never been so affronted. "You have caused trouble for the last time, Baboon." Baboon laughed uproariously, flailing his long limbs, and he was knocking food and drink to the floor and was thrashing about wildly. He only just had time to leap out of the way as a flying axe hurtled towards him and embedded itself in the wall. "Come on now, Vimtyr," he protested. "It was only a joke, an aged peach wine just for you to enjoy." But at this point, Vimtyr was in a rage and he could not be reasoned with. He charged across the bar, another axe raised, while Baboon leapt to his feet, using his tail to whip his staff from the floor and into his hand. Vimtyr aimed to cut Baboon's head clean from his body, but the monkey swiftly parried any strikes with his staff. The patrons around the Drunken Dragon cleared the floor. Murmurs about this not being the time or the place, or what Vledick might think, went unheard of by Vimtyr and Baboon as they engaged in a ferocious duel. When Vimtyr swung his axe, Baboon would jab him in the stomach. And on the contrary, Baboon would strike at his head, and Vimtyr would kick him aside. Tables were tossed across the tavern, bottles were smashed into thousands of tiny fragments, but the fight still raged on. The Whispering Axe was hard on the offensive and backed Baboon into the staircase, but the monkey thrust himself upwards with his staff and grabbed onto the second floor railing with his tail. "You can't catch me," grinned Baboon, dangling in front of the still enraged Vimtyr. The bandit was usually strong-willed enough to resist being egged on, but not today, and Vimtyr sprinted up the stairs while Baboon hurled himself onto the rafters, tossing copper coins at Vimtyr as he ran. "It was about time I showed you why they call me the Whispering Axe," said Vimtyr, reaching for the axes as he carried them around his waist. 1 axe, 2 axes, even 3 axes. They were flung through the air with a huge amount of might, making a soft whirring sound as they flew. One by one, Baboon dodged, but he started to look truly unnerved for the first time, with each axe getting closer than the last, and the third cutting a few hairs from the back of his neck. Sadly for us all, Baboon could not resist taunting. He turned round, raised his cloak, and waved his buttocks at Vimtyr, and it was as red as Vimtyr's face. Baboon scrambled down from the rafters and tossed himself through an open window and onto the roof below. But Vimtyr was not to be deterred. He climbed out the window after his foe, and they continued their back-to-back blows. Baboon's staff was notably shorter than when the fight began, but he would not back down. The patrons had gathered outside the tavern and watched from the grass below as the rooftop duel only grew ever more wild. The bandit slashed, a powerful slash, but Baboon cast it aside and knocked the axe to the ground. Vimtyr reached for another, but he was out, and most of his axes were firmly wedged into the walls of the Drunken Dragon. "Do you yield?" asked Baboon. Vimtyr yelled and charged at the monkey, tackling him off the roof. The pair tumbled through the air and crashed into a heap on the ground, but they would not stop. They punched, they kicked, both weaponless and both refusing to give in to their own exhaustions, for this was exhausting indeed. It was at this point that a bard extraordinaire emerged from the tavern. He was a handsome fellow wearing a blue jacket with a raven perched just on his shoulder. He walked down the steps with his guitar raised. You know I'm speaking the truth, particularly the handsome part because, well, that bard was me. I began to play a soothing tone and it spread throughout the air, captivating all that heard it. The melody was mellow, but it filled the area, and everyone from gathered patrons to squirrels to all animals around all listened intently. Calm down, adventurers, calm down. Everyone, gather round. Come on, I'll sort this mess out. We tell a tale about Baboon and a Vim, a story of ages, a song we must all sing. For ferocious they were as they fought throughout the day. Many beers they had as they lead on the foray. So tired and weary, why will not one concede? Is it really an insult to have wine and not meat? The fight will now end by the hands of the terror. Seize your brawl, I declare. Let's end this endeavor. As my song filled their ears and their hearts, Vimtyr and Baboon fell limply. They finally have caved into their exhaustion, but the song rejuvenated them at the same time. The fight was over, and peace was returned to the Drunken Dragon. Well, I wish I could tell you that the peace was forever, because even my songs aren't that powerful. Baboon was sent away, not to return until the next day. Vimtyr, however, was approached by Vledick. Vimtyr, my friend, said Vledick. I believe that you have a greater calling than to be involved in petty scraps with Baboon. You have the heart of a true warrior, and we've all seen it. Behind that ferocious visage, there's a man who truly cares for the people, and I urge you to travel to Thealden. It's a land filled with great dangers, and there are plenty of people there that need your protection. Yes, Vledick, said the bandit. I think that it is this time. I shall do what you ask me and make for Thealden. And Vledick smiled. I'm pleased to hear this, Vimtyr, he said. As the Drunken Dragon grows by the day, I expect you'll be not the only adventurer travelling to Thealden. And Vimtyr nodded. I've got no doubt that many new adventurers from the Drunken Dragon will want somewhere safe to set up their taverns, and I am sure that this will be so. And so Vimtyr continued his journey. He travelled south to Thealden where no one knew him, where he could become one with the woods, where he was a blank slate, and it did not take long for the name Whispering Axe to attach itself anew as his blades flung through the air slaying beasts aplenty. The only thing to follow him, aside from his name, was a monkey with a staff.